I welcome you all for this lecture series in the course Basic Civil and Mechanical Engineering. We are in the part of discussing what is casting, what is patent, and today's lecture we are going to see about something called as allowance. So what is basically an allowance called, right? So whenever you make a pattern and whenever you make a molding, the patent is actually removed and it is the replica model of the product. The size and shape of this patent will always have impressions on the product. So the close accuracy and tolerances has to be maintained in the product. So that is possible because we are giving lot of allowances for the patent when we make it. So the number one allowance is shrinkage allowance. As the name indicates, contraction or shrinkage allowance, we can call it as. And this kind of allowance is defined as the reduction is the dimension of the cast during cooling or solidification process. So this is a general property of all materials. The magnitude of shrinkage varies from material to material, but every material shrinks. That is very important. Whenever there is a phase change from liquid to solid, molten metal which is poured into the cavity will always change its phase when it gets cooled. So in that context, we need to give some allowance to the pattern. For example, if the size of the thickness of this rib, which is shown here. So it, for example, the total height and the total width of this bottom part, it is 50 by 100. So after completing the casting process, so we are going to get only 49 or 99 size as the height and base, because the material, when it solidifies, it shrinks to a particular size. So that should be maintained in the shrinkage allowance. Shrinkage allowance is given always more than the size of the actual patent, right? So coming to the draft allowance, when the patent is removed from the mold, the parallel surface to the direction at which the patent is withdrawn gets damaged slightly and gets converted into slightly tapered surface. For compensation of these changes, these parallel surfaces are patent are made slightly tapered nearly 1 to 2 degrees. This allows easy removal of patent from the mold and it does not cause affect the casting by any way. The changes in the patent surface to prevent it damages from the damages are called draft allowance, right? So we have to prevent the patent surface from damages. So we need to give draft allowance. So draft allowance, the magnitude of taper depends upon the molding methods, mold materials, and shape and size of the pattern. So the next one is machining allowance. To obtain good surface finish, the final product of the casting is machined with the process like turning or grinding to improve the surface finish. Casting, we are hardly going to get a surface finish with this not meeting the requirements. Then we have to go for machining. So this machining after the casting process causes a significant loss of metal from the mold part. To compensate this loss, machining or finishing allowance are given in the pattern of casting. Shake or raping allowance, when patent is to be removed from the sand of the casting, the patent will have to be shaken slightly to remove it from the sand, and this will cause a slight increase in dimensions of the casting. To compensate this increase in dimensions of the casting, the patterns are made slightly smaller from the casting. This changes in dimensions of the pattern is also known as shaking or wrapping allowance. So the next point is distortion allowance. When the metal is cooling process, the stress is developed in the solid metal due to uneven metal thickness in the casting process. This stress may cause distortion or bending in the casting. To avoid this bending or distortion, we are giving distortion allowance. So this kind of distortions can happen. So I recommend a small video that has to be seen for understanding, and here is the link. So let us quickly summarize what we have discussed today. So we have started with pattern allowance. The number one allowance is shrinkage allowance, and the number two allowance is draft allowance. And number three allowance, what we have seen is distortion or camber allowance, shaking and wrapping allowance, and machining allowance, and finally the draft allowance, which is based on different things, right? The magnitude of taper depends on molding methods, mold materials, shape and sizes. So with this, we will conclude this lecture series. Thank you.